All right, Internet, what is going on? So today's challenge was a doozy. It was not easy. This challenge has a series of elements that come into the attack, and I'm going to try to explain it at the beginning to give it a high-level understanding of what we're doing here, because I'm not sure how confident I am and how I can explain the details, but we'll give it a shot. So first off, we are presented with a pretty intense quote. You can read it for yourself when you have the chance. It comes from an interesting movie called Bad Boy Bubby. I watched the trailer. Not my kind of film, but either way, this was an interesting quote. I thought a little mind melting, but either way, so we're presented with a quote, and we can see there's a few things on here. So we have a quote, we have a dialog box where you can actually change this box, change the items on the screen. So if you change it to DE, it's going to be in German. I think it's German. Change it to E, it's English, and the language here, the one that's set is always English for default, because if you change it if we go from DE to language, it's gonna not do anything. But as soon as you load the screen, it defaults to English. Additionally, you can see up in the URL, when we're clicking this button here, we're getting additional parameters. So we can see that there's basically a key of command. So the command is lang, and then the value is going to be en. So we have command after the question mark, lang, which is language, and then en for our value that we input from here. So that's what we know, and basically we need to figure out a way to get the password for the next level. Completely honest with you guys, I struggled hard for this. I tried to do it manually, and then I had to end up doing it through Python. I understand how it's done manually. I just couldn't get it to work either on Zap or Burp. Don't know what I was doing wrong. Either way, I'm going to explain what I understand. So this attack has a series of things that I'm going to try to summarize. So there's a file inclusion attack. There's a file inclusion vulnerability we're going to leverage, and the specific type of file inclusion vulnerability is going to be local file inclusion. There's also going to be some directory traversal that's going to happen here within our attack, and then we're also going to do some code execution, remote code execution on this attack. So I'll try to string all that together. So what we're going to do with this attack specifically is I'm going to draw some pictures here. So we have us here, as always, our stick figure. Then we have the server we're trying to get to here. And the few things that we're going to do is first thing is we need to figure out a way to traverse the directory to get to the files that we want. And that's gonna happen up here in the URL section. So we're going to say DT for traversal. So we're going to traverse the directory. We're going to figure out some way to do that. I'll show you how we figured it out, but that's going to be up here in the URL section. We're going to do that. Next, in the attack, we're going to do some local file inclusion. And that local file inclusion attack is basically going to be us trying to get to a local file. And that local file is going to be the Natas web path. So in previous challenges, we've gone to a specific location which had the Natas _ web pass, and then there was a / Natas, and then some sort of number here of the number you're trying to get to. So we're going to try to get to this file, that local file, and we're going to try to have that cat out the password to us. And then our code's going to be basically some PHP code that's going to there's two ways I've seen this done. So there's either a system function that you can use to have the system run the setup for you, and then the other one is file _ something. I'll explain something. And this is another function that basically reads a file, and the file that we're reading is here. And then once it reads that file, then it cats that out into a string, and you can read that string onto your page here. So we're gonna traverse the directory. We're gonna get some local file inclusions that we want to get to, and then we're going to do some remote code execution through PHP. So hopefully that was somewhat understandable what we're trying to achieve. All right, so first things first, I go to the source code as usual, and let me take a step back and explain some of the solutions first. So some of the solutions I came across that were actually quite good in the explanation to help me understand what was happening was this one here. So Ozark does a great job breaking down the explanation of how they came about this and how they kind of figured out how to solve the challenge here. So they had really good explanation. This one here, Security Times, they had a decent explanation. They did a good job at explaining kind of how they did it through burp, because Ozark does it through a Python script, I think. Yeah, they do it through a Python script. The other explanation here, so this one on Medium, this one does a good job as well explaining through burp, so that's a good burp one. This does burp as well, but I think this explanation is probably one of the best when it comes to burp. So N0J, great job, you did it again, buddy. And then really the two things I wanted to point out here are two YouTube videos. So Chris Dale we've talked about, and John Hammond we've talked about as well. Chris Dale does a good job here. He does burp, but I think the really cool thing that he points out and really talks through is the discovery process. So going through the process, because what he does is the first portion of his video is he actually talks through exploring this without looking at the source code, trying to figure out what the issue is and how you can kind of take advantage of the vulnerability. So I think that's really cool that he walks you through that discovery process. That's one I really appreciated, and he does it in burp. The next thing is actually John Hammond does an amazing job. Honestly, you should go watch his video and just leave this video, because he does a way better job at explaining this than I probably ever could, at least right now in my quote-unquote knowledge in cybersecurity. So really what he does is he does it through a Python script. I hijacked his Python script to get the solution for myself, but he does a really good job at explaining all the steps and why everything is done. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be a repeat of what he said, and then a combination of all the other tutorials I've read, and also a lot of the stuff I've read outside of this. So I highly recommend you checking him out as well. So with that being said, we're going to jump into a few things. So we'll look at the source code here. And in the source code, there's a few things. Cheers and hearts to Malvina. No idea who that was. I tried to Google it, couldn't figure it out. Anywho, so there's a few functions in here. And there's a function here, there's a larger function here, and there's two functions down here. We're going to focus on three of these. So the first one, you can see it's the set language function. So if we actually skip down to the bottom and see what's happening in the body, the website itself. So we're going to get some echoes out, which is basically echoing out a greeting, a message, and a footer, which is what we're seeing here. So we have, I'm assuming the greeting is the quote, this is the message, and this is the footer. Those are the three areas that we're seeing from this code here. We have a set language function, which is the function that we're doing here. So we set the language here. And then we have a session start, which is basically establishing the PHP session that we have with the server. So that's the PHP body piece here. And another thing is here is we're listing out files. So when you set the language, it's pulling a file from a specific location to present back this quote in the language that you're seeing. So if I change this to English, it's going to a server. So if I'm going to draw, because I have a thing to draw, so I'm going to draw all day long. So if I put en inside of this dialog box here, then what's happening is basically we have our server here, and on our server we have two files. So we have file 1, which is an English quote, and then we have file 2, which is I think it's German, I hope it's German, quote. And what we're doing is once we select this en in here, we're basically going to go to our server. We're going to say, okay, the service is okay. They've selected en inside of that location, so I'm going to basically grab this file here, and I'm going to serve it back to our user so they can see the English quote, and vice versa for the German. And that is what this little piece here is basically. So it's looping through it and saying, okay, get me this f object from this location list of files, and I want you to echo it back out to the user. So that's that piece. And so that's what's happening here. So we have an idea of what the function is for that code. So if we go back to the top, we have our set language function, which is us choosing English or German. And in here we can see there's a few things that are happening. So the request is taking our request, which is the choice that we've made. So the choice that we make here, but the request it's actually taking is up here in the URL section. So you can see that it's taking lang equals en. And that's going to be what's being pulled in here, because you can see the request lang is the key that we're pulling, and then en is what we're putting in there. So once we've set that up, it's gonna return that. So now you can see here it's calling another function called safe includes. And now safe includes is the thing that we're going to have to toy around with a lot to actually get the directory traversal and the file inclusion piece that we talked about previously. So the interesting thing here that was pretty interesting is they have two things in here, three things. One is basically trying to prevent directory traversals, And then this other one is basically trying to stop you from stealing the Natas web pass file from that location, the password. And with the directory traversals in Wikipedia, you can see here basically they talk about what it is and how it exists. The thing they point out here is basically a // is a way to climb up a directory. So say you're going to a website. That website automatically puts you in a location, and let's say this staircase is our location, our directory tree, right? And when we come in, we're here. That's when we go into a website. This is the part of the website that we're using. So this part of the website should be gated off from everything else on that server, and you should only have access to this. To traverse a directory, one of the ways of doing that is actually doing a // which you can see here, and that's going to take me up one to this next directory. You do that again, then it's going to take you up to the next directory, and do it again and again and again, and you can basically just keep doing this until you've gotten all the way to the root of the tree of that directory, and then you're at the root folder. So that's the premise of a directory traversal. And with this specific function here, you can see, if I zoom in a bit, they're basically looking for that specific // and once they see the // you can see there's another call here, a replace function that's built into, I'm assuming, PHP. It's basically replacing that // with a blank field. So anytime we put in a // it's going to basically scratch that and then remove it, and you're going to have nothing there. So the idea here is, how do we actually avoid that but still get in? And the interesting thing that a lot of people pointed out in other answers is that this isn't a loop. This is just a one if statement. So there's one condition. It's checking to see if that condition's true, and if it is, it's going to do what it needs to do here, and then it's going to continue through the code. So it's not looping through and checking for continuous directory traversals. So that means that we could actually manipulate this in a way where we could actually put more dots and slashes and not have it excluded. And what that looks like is, say, if there's two ways you can do this. There's many ways you can do this, but the ways that I've seen in the different solutions. So there's this way here, and then I think the other one is a .. // Yeah, that's it there. So you have three dots, a slash, a dot, and a slash here. And what's happening is basically once this portion here, so it checks to see if there's a .. / here, and it's going to remove that. But once it removes that, we still have the .. and the slash on the outskirts of it that still exist. So that means that we're still going to have a .. remaining. That's still going to work. The same thing applies here. So we see a .. here, so we're checking for the .. in this intersection, so that's going to get removed. But then we still have another .. remaining, which will still work. So we're going to basically have to build funky directory traversal .. to get up to the root directory. So that's the one thing we're going to bypass with this first piece of the safe includes. The next piece is it's checking specifically for Natas Web Pass, but where it's checking is actually in the safe includes section, which is where it's getting its request, which is in the URL piece here. So this one's quite funky, this piece here. And the reason it's funky is that if it's looking for Natas Web Pass, the specific text string inside of the URL, because it's getting it from the request section, then there are other things that we can manipulate on our side, such as the user agent string. And the way I can show you this is actually through Zap. So in Zap, I have opened up Natas 25, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run this. And you can see that inside of this get section, and also the display is bigger. The display is bigger because I figured out how to make it bigger. So if I go in here, you can see that I have it set up here. You can, we got all our stuff good here. So I'm going to change this to English. We have our setup here. And then I'm actually going to show you the .. So I have some stored here to show you the example. So I have my funky .. here, and then I'm actually going to go to the etc folder, and then I'm actually going to cat out the password and hosts. So if we copy and paste this into our URL, that's going to be our directory traversal, and then into the root directory. We push enter, and you can see that what we're doing is we're printing out the passwords of all of the passwords from that server here. And in addition to that, you can see that we have some warnings down here, because what the original function is trying to do is, let me make this a little bigger, it's trying to actually get to the greeting that we said was the quote section at the top. So we had our quote at the top was, we quote here. We had our body here, which was the quote itself, and then we had our footer down here. So we have our greeting here that's trying to get to the file that should have that information, but it can't because I've actually moved it up to the root directory. So now it's in the etc folder instead of the location that it thinks it should be down here. So it's looking for the greeting. There is no greeting, so it's going to error out and say, undefined variable, there's nothing there that we're looking for. Same for message. The quote's not there, so we can't read it, and the same for footer. The footer's not there, we can't read it. So that's where these errors are derived from, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing there. So once we've done that, you can do the same thing here with host, just to show you once again that we're actually we're outside of the directory we're supposed to be inside of, and we're getting to where we want to get. Hosts, plural with an S. So you can see we've gotten some other information here, and it's all good, and we're escaping where we need to be escaped with the safe include. So we're bypassing that piece. Now the user agent piece. So once I've run this, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to show you some stuff in the background. So let me delete all this. All right, so we have our history here. Let's go to the most recent. Okay, host, okay. So here you can see that we have some stuff going on, that we have our get request, which is the base URL plus the command of lang, and then we have our funky, basically directory traversal here trying to get to hosts. In addition to that, we see a few other things. So we have our user agent string, which is something that we can control. And we also have a few other items here that we can control as well. Then we have our PHP session ID. So the reason we know that we actually can and want to control the user agent is if I scroll down a bit further, this is the last one that I've not explained yet, this last function that I wanted to touch on. And this is basically logging information of the things that I as a user am doing, and it's going to log that information into a specific location. And that specific location it's going to log it to is here. So remember that we're sitting in this location, that's where we're supposed to be as a user on this website, and it's going to log basically my session ID. It's going to put it in a log file, and what it's logging is the message it provided back to me. It's going to log the user agent string, and it's also going to log the date and time. So with all that being said, by looking at this specific string here, you can see that it's just taking the user agent string and it's taking it as is. There is no sanitization happening here. It's taking the string and there is no checking if it's PHP code or anything else. So that's really the red flag here, that within this specific location, we can input our PHP code to actually cat out the password that we want. And to get to that, we're going to have to, put in everything that we need to put in to the user agent string so we can actually get that information out. So if I go back to Zap, you can see that we have our PHP code here. And what we're going to want to do is actually open this up here, and I'll run through what it would look like manually. I can't get it to work for some reason because, I'm an idiot. But anywho, we have to change this redirection. So we don't want to go to host, but we want to go to the Natas web pass location. And to do that, I'm going to show you an answer here that I hijacked. So we want to go back from here to our session ID. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that in here. And remember, we're going to want to go up a few layers. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to directory traverse back a few times. And then we can see that we're in the location that has provided us. And the reason we know that's the right location is because if we go back to the source code, we're basically taking this out, and we're working our way back up from there. So we have that, and now we want to put our PHP session ID in there. So we're going to put our PHP session ID into there. And then we're going to delete this, and we're going to say .log. And the reason we know it's .log is because we know that from the source code. So if we go back to the source code, we can see that there's a .log here. So we just need to include that in addition to our session ID. So with that being settled, I'm going to try to run this, but I know it's not going to work because I've tried it a million times. So let's remove that. So we have two. Okay, so we have our PHP session ID, we have .log, so we want to go there. So if we run this, we get back a few errors. So you can see what it's erroring out here is that it's basically taking, remember, the timestamp. So if I go back to the source code, it's taking the timestamp of what we're doing it on. It's taking our user agent, and then it's taking the message. So if we come back here, we can see we have our timestamp here. We have our user agent here. And then we have a message provided, basically saying that you're trying to do a directory traversal. And the reason they know that is because they acknowledged the first ... but they didn't acknowledge the external ... slashes that are building up here for our directory traversal. So the next thing we want to do is, so we know that we can do this. The user agent string, as I said, is just a string. So if I just do hello, what's the, and then send that, you can see that it's not doing what I wanted it to do. Oh, it is. Here it is. Just kidding. So it's got this repeating itself, but then you can see down here it says hello, what's up. So that's text string that we can edit. So the next thing is basically putting in some PHP code there to hopefully have it do what we want it to do. So the one function I was speaking about is called file get contents. So you can do file get contents PHP code, or you can do a system call. So let's take this one from John Hammond, and he uses a system instead of file get contents, but it's the same premise. So we'll copy that and we will paste that into Zap here. So we have the PHP, we're doing a system call, we're going to cat out Natas web pass, and the reason we're doing it in this location is because Natas web pass isn't being looked for here. Natas web pass is instead being looked for, remember, in the get request, which is sitting here. And we know that because we have our get request here, and it's calling this URL, and it's looking for Natas web pass in this location. If it's there, then it doesn't allow you to do it. But what it's not looking for is Natas web pass inside of the user agent string, just the get location. So if we try to run it there, then it'll most likely not work, because I've tried it a million times and it works. It works this time, Internet, because I honestly don't know why. It didn't work for me the last time. I may have messed up with like a single quote or a semicolon, but I'm sorry if that hurt your ears, but I'm excited that it worked. So that is a way that you can do it manually through Zap. So we have our passcode here because what we've done is we've gone out, we've done the system call, we've catted out the specific password in this location, and it's given it back to us here in the response. So if I copy that out, we got our password there. And then I'm also going to show you the Python setup just because I thought that was what I had to show you originally. Anywho, so if actually I want to come here and refresh this and see if it shows. No, okay. So this is the code from John Hammond and the way that he set it up. So it's really a lot of the same stuff. So you can see basically we have our username and password. We're going to input our username into this field here for the URL. We're going to get our session. We're going to set up our header. So we have our PHP code here for the header agent. We're going to get the URL. So once we've authenticated ourselves, then we're going to post to that URL. And the post that we're going to make to that URL is going to be the aforementioned directory traversal. So we're going to directory traverse out of this. So it's going to grab the PHP session ID. And then we're going to authorize ourselves again. Once it's done all that, it's going to print out the response so we can get our answer. And if I come here and clear this and run it once more for you here, you can see that what we get back is the code's here. So we got our code, we got our timestamp, and we got our message. And you can see this basically printing out all the stuff I explained previously. So, Internet, I'm pretty confident that I explained that in a reasonable, understandable way. So anywho, I will see you on the next challenge.